Welcome to the second of the 3 U.S.-China Agriculture Dialogue, brought to you by U.S. Heartland China Association, in close collaboration with our partners across U.S. and China. My name is Min Fan. I am the Executive Director of U.S. Heartland China Association, a bipartisan nonprofit committed to promoting a better, healthier U.S.-China relationship with a special focus on the American Heartland region. Distinguished speakers, honored guests, and friends, at the opening celebration last week, Ambassador Quinn has shared with us the daunting challenges our world is confronted with, and the 3 scientists who are the inspirations for this series of dialogues: Norman Borlaug, Yuan Longping, and George Washington Carver. They are not only just scientists and innovators, they're also educators. We have gathered here today some of the top agriculture educators from across U.S. China to continue the dialogue in finding the way forward and helping both U.S. China to discuss shared challenges and find a shared future. And to help us kick off today's dialogue, we received recorded remarks from 2 agriculture leaders from the Heartland states, Missouri Director of Agriculture Chris Chin and Minnesota Commissioner of Agriculture Tom Peterson. Let's hear their remarks first from Missouri.
Hi, I'm Chris Chin, Director at the Missouri Department of Agriculture, and I want to welcome you to the Agriculture Education Dialogues. Missouri agriculture is very diverse. We have everything from corn, cotton, soybeans, pigs, cattle, sheep, goats, grapes, peaches. We even have a very abundant forest industry in the state of Missouri. Our agriculture products and our wood products are shipped around the world, and we're proud of the diversity of Missouri's agriculture industry. We also are very lucky to be positioned right here in the Midwest. We are actually home to the Ag Coast of America. We have the Missouri and the Mississippi rivers in Missouri that allow us to have another venue to ship our products for export market opportunities. We're also very proud of the Animal Health Corridor in Kansas City, as well as the Plant Science Corridor in St. Louis. The research and the technology that has come out of these 2 areas of our state have benefited not only Missouri farmers and ranchers when it comes to plant pest and disease issues and animal health issues, it's also benefited the entire world. The technology and the research that happens in our state is so important to the future of Missouri agriculture, but also to the future of agriculture around the globe. We're very proud of these technologies, the ag educators, and the research that happens, because we know that some of the most important tools a farmer can have is to have ag technology, ag research, and ag education in our toolbox to make sure that we have a vibrant agriculture industry to pass on to that next generation. I want to thank you guys for taking the time that you are tonight to be a part of this webinar, and I hope that you have great conversations moving forward. Thank you. Hi.
Thank you. Next, let's hear from Minnesota Commissioner of Agriculture, Tom Peterson.
Hi, I'm Tom Peterson, the Commissioner of the Minnesota Department of Agriculture. And I want to thank the U.S. Heartland China Association for the opportunity to address the Agricultural Education Dialogue at the U.S.-China Agricultural Roundtable. The Agricultural Education Division at the University of Minnesota was established in 1910. The Roundtable is focusing on 3 individuals, Norman Borlaug, George Washington Carver, and Professor Yuan Longping, that made significant contributions to agriculture and how they shaped the way we teach agriculture not only in the U.S., but around the world. In particular, I'd like to take note the important contribution that Dr. Norman Borlaug made to the world, as well as to the state of Minnesota. Dr. Borlaug was widely described as the father of the broad agricultural movement known as the Green Revolution. His breeding of high-yielding crop varieties helped prevent mass famines that were widely predicted in the 1960s. On the same amount of land, wheat output could be tripled or even quadrupled. Later, the idea was applied to rice, the staple crop for nearly half the world's population, with yields jumping several-fold compared with traditional varieties. Norman Borlaug was fond of the University of Minnesota and appreciated the many opportunities the university afforded and the generations of students and faculties it inspired. Generations of the University of Minnesota graduates joined Dr. Borlaug and served in various capacities during the Green Revolution. Nowadays, many in Minnesota honor his legacy and are inspired to continue his work. Dr. Borlaug's advances in plant breeding led to spectacular success in increasing food production in Asia and brought him international acclaim, including in 1970 when he was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize. Although little known in prospering countries, Norman Borlaug was very famous and a much beloved figure in developing and highly populated nations. He was a trusted advisor to scientists and governments and a great friend to farmers worldwide. He used his fame and his voice not for personal gain, but rather to speak for those who have no voice, the rural working poor. By certain calculations, about half the world's population goes to bed every night consuming grain descended from one of the high-yield varieties developed by Borlaug and his colleagues of the Green Revolution. Norman Borlaug's research, along with the important contributions of George Washington Carver and Professor Longping in crop development and improvement, have had a lasting impact on agriculture's ability to feed the hungry around the world. We look forward to further scientific collaboration between China and Minnesota, as well as growing agricultural trade. Farmers face unique challenges right now when it comes to the weather and commodity prices, and these barriers can prevent new or potential farmers from entering the field, especially those from underrepresented communities. As we build the agricultural industry of the future, it's critical that all voices and ideas are at the table. To that end, the Minnesota Department of Agriculture has begun a new effort to help emerging farmers overcome unique challenges to success in our modern agricultural economy. We hope to identify and enact policies that help everyone who wants to be a farmer succeed, regardless of their gender, ethnicity, race, or country of origin. The department will soon begin a project called Black Farmers in Minnesota, an Oral History, to preserve the history of our state's black farmers. The effort will take place thanks to a grant from the Minnesota Historical Society aimed at preserving our state's history and culture. We are excited to now be able to capture the stories of Minnesota's black farmers from our history and in the present moment. Thank you so much for engaging with us in this dialogue. I look forward to learning more about how agricultural education can help bring us together. Thank you.
Thank you for the remarks.
Hi.
Now to lead us through the rest of the program today is Dr. Wendong Zhang, assistant professor from the Department of Economics at Iowa State University. He's also an agriculture committee member of our nonprofit and a vocal advocate for U.S.-China collaboration in agriculture. He's also affiliated with the Center for Agricultural and Rural Development. Now I'd like to turn this over to Dr. Zhang, who tell us the two segments and lead us through the rest of the program. Dr. Zhang.
Thank you, Min. Distinguished speakers and honored guests, it's my great honor to moderate this session with so many great leaders of agricultural education from both US and China. And we have a great program tonight. I have it, so we have two segments. The segment one will last for about 80 minutes, will consist 6 great leaders coming from both US and Chinese agricultural universities. And the second segment will consist mainly focusing on how technology is changing not only education at the campus, but also education beyond campuses in terms of extension and outreach. I would encourage you to submit your questions through the Q&A button. You also have the option to vote for the question that you like most. And if you have some question you want to submit private to me, you can choose the chat option as well. So could you please go back to the last slide? Great. So for the first segment, we have 6 great leaders who will be speaking 7 minutes individually, and then we'll have some moderated remarks, and we have some pre-submitted questions that I will choose and not we have a lot of submitted questions, so we'll probably not be able to get to all of them. And so I will ask each panelist to choose a question that you would like to respond to. Not necessarily, you don't have to respond to every question. For the 6 panelists, we have the first panelist would be President Sun Qixin, who is the president of China Agricultural University. Before that, he was also the president of Northwest Agricultural and Forestry University in China. And the second panelist will be Dean Waterhill, who is the dean of College of Agriculture, Environment, and Nutritional Sciences from Tuskegee University, where George W. Cover has worked for a long time. And following that, the third panelist will be Professor Jikun Huang, who is director of China Center for Agricultural Policy, who is also a prominent ag economist at Peking University. The fourth panelist will be Dean Helene Dillard, who is the dean of the College of Agriculture and Environmental Sciences at UC Davis. Before that, she was also associate dean and director for extension at Cornell. The fifth panelist is Dean Jing Zhu, who is the dean of College of Agriculture, College of Economics and Management at Nanjing Agricultural University. Last but not least, we'll have Dean Cassian Kress, who used to be my boss when I joined ISU. She was vice president for extension at ISU before then. Now I graduated from Ohio State, so I joke with my advisor that Dean Kress is now her boss. So she is now the dean of College of Food and Agricultural and Environmental Sciences at The Ohio State University. And so we have a great program for the segment 1, but let me also remind you what the segment 2 speakers would be, and that program will start in about 80 minutes. So for the segment 2, we have 4 great speakers as well. The first 2 speakers are Dr. Shenggen Fan, who is the chair professor and dean of Academy of Global Food Economics and Policy at China Agricultural University. But before that, he served as the director general at IFPRI, International Food Policy Research Institute, for about 10 years, which is the first of the high-level position held by Chinese at the international agricultural organizations. Followed by Associate Vice President Damona Doye, who is Oklahoma Cooperative Director for the Oklahoma Cooperative Extension Service at Oklahoma State University. Damona is also the U.S. Vice President for International Farm Management Association as well. The third and the fourth speaker for the segment 2 would be Professor Kevin Chen, who is Chair Professor at Zhejiang University and also International Dean for their China Academy of Rural Development. And he is also the China Program Leader at IFPRI in Beijing as well. Lastly, we also have another ISU alumni along with Damona, Nick Paulson, who is Associate Professor and Director of Graduate Program at the Ag and Consumer Economics Department at University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. And he is also a critical member of the award-winning Farm Doc team. So with that, we'll go to segment 1 and start with President Sun from China Agricultural University to make his remarks. President Sun.
金校长，您这边的声音没有打开。金校长，您这边声音没有打开。
谢谢张文教授。我们今天非常高兴啊，由美国腹地中国协会发起组织的中美农业圆桌会议的农业教育的一场峰会的论坛。我想呢，在我们全球经济处在这样一个发展恢复阶段，在各国都在努力克服新冠疫情的影响，来做好本国的发展的同时，召开这样一个中美之间的圆桌会议呢，是非常必要的，也是非常及时的。 中美两国都是农业生产的大国，农产品的贸易大国和消费大国，两国都将农业视为国家的战略性的基础产业。在过去40多年中，中美两国的农业合作成效显著，双方达成了加强以科学技术为基础的农业创新，促进粮食安全，并就扩大创新技术在农业中的应用开展对话的共识。在这一共识的指导下，中美两国的农业的贸易、农业的教育、农业的科技合作都取得了非常健康的发展。我们相信这样一种两国的友好合作，不仅有利于提高两国人民的福祉，也对推动世界农业的发展、解决全球的粮食安全、人类健康问题，同时对发展中国家的发展都提供了有益的借鉴。中美农业的科技交流合作在推动中美农业交流合作中扮演着一个非常重要的角色。40多年来，我们两国的相关的高等教育单位携手培养了面向全球化市场、面向绿色发展的科学家、技术人员、商业和政治领袖，推动了技术革命、产业升级，共同面对全球的粮食安全、人类健康、气候变化、生态保护等重大问题，在合作中共同进步、共同发展。中国农业大学和我们中国的其他40多所涉农的高校，坚持以科技服务中国发展，为中国的解决粮食安全问题，乃至为全球的粮食安全和摆脱贫困问题都做出了重要的贡献，也为实现联合国可持续发展目标做出了中国的贡献。各位朋友可能最近关注到，就在1个多月前，中华人民共和国主席习近平先生向全世界宣言，经过过去12年的攻坚战，现行标准下的近1亿中国贫困人口已经实现了全部脱贫。中国提前10年完成了联合国2030可持续发展目标中消除贫困的目标，创造了减贫的中国样本，同时也为其他发展中国家的减贫事业做出了榜样。这其中我们中国农业大学也为国家的脱贫做出了重要的贡献。我们还有诸多的教授得到了习近平总书记的表扬。中国有一位伟大的哲学家叫孟子，孟子呢曾经讲有一句话：独乐乐不如众乐乐。面对全球的粮食安全、气候变化和贫困等全球性的挑战，中国农业大学愿意携手全球的伙伴们，一起为创造一个更好的地球来共同努力。比如自2015年以来，中国农业大学联合了世界顶尖农业大学，包括我们今天在会场的 UC Davis 康奈尔大学，包括荷兰的瓦赫宁根大学和巴西的圣保罗大学和中国农业大学5家联合发起了全球的高等农业教育联盟，我们叫做 A5。我们这个 A5联盟的一个重要的宗旨就是进一步深化推动全球的教育科技合作，来更好的推动全球的农业科技创新，为全球的农业发展做出我们高等教育的更好的贡献。去年的新冠疫情爆发以来给我们全球的农业合作、教育合作也带来了前所未有的挑战。国际的人员流动锐减， 同时，国际关系的紧张局势也给国际教育交流带来了诸多的不确定性。但是几千年来，人类从来不善于在危机中遇新机，在变局中开新局。过去1年多来，中国农业大学也从未中断过与包括美国的伙伴在内的交流合作。去年1年中我自己先后和康奈尔大学、UC Davis 在内的众多合作伙伴多次互致问候、互致鼓励，通过线上组织论坛、开展学术交流，并开展了中美的减贫专家对话等系列活动。疫情可以阻碍我们的人员的交流，但是阻断不了我们共同为美好世界做努力的决心和信心。这里面我还要特别强调，由于新冠疫情的影响康奈尔大学的部分来自中国的留学生没有办法回到美国上学。我自己和康奈尔大学校长，我们双方联合决定，康奈尔大学的将近120多名学生，由于不能到美国回校参加教学，决定在中国农业大学的校园里面生活、学习并进行线上教学。我觉得疫情虽然阻断了我们的面对面的交流，但是更加加深了我们坚定信心、共同推进合作的更大的力量。对于疫情虽然给我们带来了一些不便，但是我就更加坚定了我们共同努力、共同克服困难，并始终把合作推向深化的新的目标。当今世界新型的绿色革命要求我们从全球的市场角度重新思考农业科技创新和农业的人才培养。面对100年未有之大变局，我相信中美高校之间还有更多的合作空间，比如生态保护、气候变化、可持续发展、减贫、全球的粮食和食物安全等重大问题。在解决这些问题上，我们教育担负着更加重大的培养未来世界所需的创新人才、国际交流人才的重大的责任。所以在这个时候我们双方举办这样一个中美的农业教育的论坛呢，我觉得是非常有意义的。需要强调的是，中国的发展首先是为解决中国自身的现代化的问题。中国的发展从来不针对其他国家，也不对其他国家的发展构成威胁。同时，中国的发展需要更多的依靠国际合作来取得共赢 win-win。同时，中国也愿意，也已经有能力为全球的发展贡献出中国的力量。我相信今天的教育对话汇聚了这么一大批专家学者，希望我们能够深入研讨，进一步凝聚共识，能够坚定信心，进一步推动中美两国的教育合作走向深化，为两国的经济、贸易合作做出我们高等教育应有的贡献。我自己呢曾经多次在美国访问，我们 Heartland 的这些20个州我基本上有1半的州我都亲自去过，给我留下了非常深刻的印象。Norman Borlaug 先生，我曾经2次跟他会面，第一次呢是1992年在 Iowa State， 第二次在时隔10年以后的2002年，我在 Texas College Station 有再次见到他。袁隆彬院士先生呢是我的好朋友，所以我们这2位先生都是我们国际的农业科技教育方面的杰出领袖。另外 Norman Borlaug 教授也还是曾经是中国农业大学的荣誉教授。 所以我们非常高兴呀，今天举行这样一个活动啊，我们共同来回顾双方的合作历史。我觉得更重要的是面对未来，坚定信心，更加好的深入推动我们中美两国的农业教育合作、农业的科技合作。再次感谢我们福地协会举行这样一个论坛，谢谢大家。
President Sun, thank you very much for your insightful remarks. I think that you're exactly right. The poverty alleviation efforts in China is really remarkable, and I think in the U.S. is also increasingly important, especially in this era of growing importance of social justice. I'm proud to say I'm actually from the same province with Confucius and Mencius, which is Shandong province for our US audience. And I think we all hope that this dialogue and maybe some of the subsequent events could serve as a springboard to build on the alliance that you talked about, that we can move forward for greater collaboration among US and Chinese agricultural industries and universities. Next, I will turn over to Dean Helene Dillard from UC Davis, who
Window,
has...
sorry, apologize, window, it's Dr. Walter Hill.
Oh, sorry. So, sorry, Dean Hill. So next we'll have Dean Waterhill, who has been Dean of Agriculture since 1987 at Tuskegee University. I have to apologize for my inexperience because that's exactly the year I was born. So I really truly remarkable service and kudos to you, Dean Hill, and who I also want to mention that Dean Hill is also director for the NASA Center for Food and Environmental Systems for Human Explorations of Space, and who was and also co-founded for the Cover Integrative Sustainability Center. And in 2016, Dean Hill was inducted to USDA National Institute of Food Agriculture Hall of Fame. So I apologize for the hiccup. Dean Hill, you have the time to give your remarks.
Well, first of all, let me say that I don't consider it a hiccup. Anytime my name is called after Helena Dillard, I'm honored. She can always go before me, and I would be grateful. So would my mother and my wife and all my granddaughters. I'm honored to be here. I did listen to the previous sessions. I got a lot from them. So I'm going to try to say what I want to say and get what I feel out and try to do it in 7 minutes. Now I'm going to integrate the words on the title screen: innovation, cooperation, connections, and justice. I'm going to say blah, and I'm getting all that in one dynamic. And one way I'm going to try to do that, go next slide, please. With this picture, you see Ambassador Quinn there with myself at Tuskegee, admiring Gandhi and Carver in that painting, which we all love. And I want to, when we talk about Carver, his time at Iowa, his connections with Secretary and Vice President Wallace, and then later with Gandhi, and then you think about Norman Borlaug and even how that's today manifested through the World Food Prize. I want to bring Du Bois into this discussion, and the double consciousness of Du Bois, or seeing the world from two sets of eyes, which is totally relevant in today's environment that we have. It's just something that all people do, but certainly African Americans, Hispanics, and women and others have to see the world from their perspective, and then from the perspective of the power brokers or whatever. So my little talk is going to do that. And what our intent here is to help us all find and inspire today's George Washington Carvers, which we all have as one of our mission. Next slide. So when I think about Carver, he was 6 years at Iowa State. And when Iowa State faculty and staff talk about about Carver, it's like he was there 100 years. He spent 47 years at Tuskegee. So why did he leave? He was in paradise. I always had that question. Why would he do that? And then I remember reading about him. He saw a person lynched. Of course, he was born a slave. The time he left, the moral act, second moral act had just been enacted. And he always had in his heart to serve his people, to educate his people. So he left paradise and went to Tuskegee, and his tools in the lab were the garbage heap. It was where he had to first get his tools. And what did he do there? Of course, he initiated cooperative extension through the Jessup Wagon. He did world-renowned research on the crops you see listed there, and much, much more, why he has his reputation. And then the institution he helped to stabilize is going today. And you see some of the listings there, and I'll come back to some, but we do lead a center of all of the 1890s, which covers 18 states. Tuskegee does lead that small farmer center. It is magnificent what we're trying to do, cutting across those state boundaries. It's not on the radar yet, but we consider that one of the continuances of George Washington Carver, just the quiet work that he manifested and left for us. Next slide. So in the sessions earlier, quite a bit was talked about the soybeans, the trade, corn, the hogs, and automotive. And automotive important because that's an important trade item for the state of Alabama. And I've been looking at the data of how the trade has changed over even the last 3 years because of policies and dialogue. And I'm gonna just stop right here and say this is kind of one of my concluding remarks. We have to get more people engaged in those dialogues. We're all connected. We touch in ways. It's the Midwest, it's the heartland, but the heartland is connected to Alabama, to Tuskegee, to China, to we're all there. We have to find a way to get a broader sector of people engaged in these debates. We have a PhD program, Integrated Public Policy, and we need those brilliant young minds, young men and women discussing China trade. So we got to find some way to do that. The other thing, the two sets of eyes, back to that double consciousness. So when you talk about the trade, that the dialogue of the trade and business that we heard, who was doing the trade? Which farmers? What was the source of those soybeans and corn that traded with China and the hogs and back and forth? And you know, you're gonna find it's really the large farmers, and they're a very small percentage, make most of the profit. Many are family farm, most family farms, and then some industrial farms. And we don't talk about the segmentation of it because we have to find a way to get more people involved. And if you look at farmer distribution in the US, 95% are white. In the 1920s or so, you had Black Americans were 14%. So we have a danger occurring here where if we need to, we're working hard, but it's going to take more to have our Black, Hispanic, Native American, Asian farmers to be a part of the future. And it's something we should build into programs like this and not just be neutral. Remember, we're looking at it two sets of eyes now. We set the tone so we can see it both from the generic way and we also see it from the other eyes of others. And then we look at small farms. We talk about them, then the governor talked about, he grew up on a small farm, and then we don't say it anymore. Get out of our way. They're 90% of the farmers in the US. And you know, they're struggling. Most of them lose money. And many of the women farmers, most of the women farmers are in this category who don't make much money, let alone the minority groups also. So there's a myriad of challenges, and then also makes a linkage between our small farmers, even though they're different, with small landholders globally. And so our work in Africa, for example, has been tremendous. We would have some of the best programs in different countries of sub-Saharan Africa because we had a commonality that just broke through the normal exchanges. They're rated very high by AID. So there's some smart, big is not better. Earlier, the speaker talked about the top 5 universities, and we love the top 5 in the Ivy League, et cetera. But I bet Dean Dillard, who's not in that list, would want to rank hers as amongst those. So we have to think through, sometimes it's the smaller who might be able to, like Carver. You understand? The geniuses come from here. We go to the next slide. And this is my last slide. And I just want to make some recommendations here for the panel. Let's include these 1890 land-grant universities. You'll see on this map where the dots are, they're covering these 18 states, very important part of our nation. You see they're very close to the heartland, just a pop away, and a pop away from California, where we have joint research and been doing it for many years with Davis on peanut genomics. I just want you to know that. So we're just a pop away from Cornell and everyone else. And with the way of communication, there should be a way for us to make this happen. What about small farmers in China? Boy, am I curious. Gosh, I would like to learn. What are the challenges they have? How are they organized? How does the state and how does the trade? And then I'd like our students to go and the farmers to go with them and an integrated group to go. And the last thing is the corporations, Syngenta and others who spoke and have a major role to play. Let's challenge them. Let's get some diversity in those interns and hirees that end up going to China and being a part and learn the languages and exchange back and forth. Let's open this thing up. That's why I was put on this panel. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dean Hill. And I can attest to the significant legacy and impact that George Washington Cover still have at ISU and even in Ames. The street outside the neighborhood I'm living is George Washington Cover Road, even beyond the campus. And what you talked about exactly right, that one of the facts that when I go out to do extension talks that people grab on, the US farmers are most interested in, to find out that China actually has 270 million farmers with on average only less than 2 US acres, not necessarily very comparable to the typical Iowa farms. So I think that your point in highlighting the roads of 1890 historically Black land-grant colleges and universities, and thinking about not only the big farms, but also small farms and the 5% that is non-white farmers and women farmers, exactly right. So next I will turn over to Professor Jikun Huang, who is a professor at School of Advanced Agricultural Sciences and who is also a director of China Center for Agricultural Policy at Peking University. And as an ag economist myself, Professor Huang is one of the source of inspiration for me, and he is one of the first fellow from China as the World Academy of Sciences, and also a fellow of Agricultural and Applied Economics Association. He is also serving currently as the president of the Asian Society of Agricultural Economists. Director Huang, it's your turn.
Hi, thank you for your nice introduction. And good morning and good evening, everyone. Great to be here to discuss with you on the education issue exchange between China and the US. And here I'm going to talk about cooperation between Chinese and US agricultural educators. Next. This slide shows what I see key challenge and opportunities we are facing in China and globally. I think that one of the bigger challenges globally, including in China, is a slowdown in agricultural productivity growth. In the meantime, in many countries, including China, and concern of food security. On the other hand, we also see there's a movement in the trade liberalization. I think this is I think not only for China, I think also globally concerned on this international trade friction. And we know that by 2030 globally, we need to achieve even as a DG, but sustainable development, including sustainable development and culture, is become emerging issues. On the other hand, climate change has an impact on many areas, including in China. I think all these change for China and for US and for other global university need a concern to deal with that. And then of course, we also there are many opportunities are emerging now, for the new technologies such as biotech, gene editing, and the digital technology, which are going to transforming a culture either in developing country or developed country. But only we on international trade, we also see that can be win-win cooperation. China now have since the early this century, China started for green development strategy, and recently, government also called for try to achieve carbon neutral by 2060. Globally, it's going to achieve by 2050. I think this is all opportunity, challenge, opportunity. Please next one more. I see this. Okay, sorry, go up. Sorry, probably I need. So I think this in these areas we have that great rooms for China and US in terms of research, cooperation, and student exchange, education, and also in knowledge shares. We like today similar with knowledge shares between China and the US as well as China with many other countries. And now it's my own experience next. It's here to see how important our collaboration between professors in China and US. I have in past 30 years, I have working with many professors in US, like Stanford University, and I'm not going to read all this list, but also working with many other organizations, research organizations, US. Next. One more, next. First of all, please, okay, continue. Let's stop here. Okay, I think one of my long-term collaborators, Scott Laser, you might know, she was from Stanford University, later moved to the UC Davis, and then later also moved back to the Stanford University. We have started working together since 1989, and which in past more than 20 years, nearly 30 years, we working together in 20 research projects. We joined writing paper more than 180s. And important is we are not only writing in English, but we also write in Chinese. And under this research cooperation project, we joined the training more than 30 MS students, PhD students. Some many of my MS students under my supervisor for MS degree, they later moved to the university in Stanford University or UC Davis. They continue doing the PhD. And then we also joined the policy brief for government. And many of those policy briefs have played important role in policy making. Next. And the other example I give you Carl Play. We also have working many several projects on agricultural technology, particularly in biotech. We also write quite many papers, joint papers, and we join the training students in China and US. And we often also hold a conference workshop like today. And all of this, I believe, have played important role for education between China and the US, and also for training the people, particular training for the young people. Next. And so these are some of our paper we join the paper together. I think I believe if only time we working on this area, we might not able to publish in all top journal. But we also believe if only on the US scholars, if want to write China paper published in top journal, it's also not so easy. So we combine advantage of both our Chinese and the US professor, so that we're able to make make an outstanding research next and can publish in top journal. And here also, I'm going to finish soon. Here is some examples. The left one, this one is a scholar. He was the first one achieve outstanding international cooperation award from Academy of Science in China. And he also one of our first economists in US achieve for friendship award from premier a few years ago. And we indeed we here so you when this figure is about 20 another. Right bottom one is 25 years ago when we were both are very young, we training PhD students together, and middle one we were in field survey about 15 years ago, and top ones I'm glad also elected as U.S. Agriculture Association fellows. And next. Last but not least, I want to use this one to further emphasize important cooperation between China and the U.S. This is called RIP, Rural Education Action Program. In this program was joined by many universities in China and the U.S. And this program is targeted try to do a number of experience, we could call RCT, right? To see how what policies, what institutions, what investment can help people to get out of poverty, to improve their education, improve their nutrition. And we have seen 2005 that more than 6 projects were joined working together between the university, US and China in this slide. Anyway, before I end on this, I see the great room for in the past and also in the future for cooperation between China and US in terms of research, in terms of training students, in terms of knowledge sharing. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Huang. I think one of the pre-submitted questions were what are some of the examples of US-China higher education and research collaboration? I think you give one of the really great examples, and Scott Rizal received the Friendship Award in 2008. As you mentioned, the highest award awarded to a non-Chinese by Premier of China. I just want to mention for those who don't know Professor Rizal, he not only can speak, one of the reasons he can write papers in Chinese is also he can speak Chinese as well, so which is remarkable for an American scholar. So with that, I will turn over to Dr. Helene Dillard, who is the Dean of the College of Agricultural and Environmental Science at UC Davis since 2014. Prior to that, she also served as the Director of Cornell Cooperative Extension for about 12 years. Dean Dillard.
Thank you. First, I want to thank the organizers for inviting me to participate in this dialogue. It's really a pleasure and an honor to be here today, so thank you so much. And I'm really pleased to see and hear all the different presentations, so I'm looking forward to that. I'll go to the next slide. I thought what I'd do is just kind of set the stage a little bit about UC Davis and how we've gone about building our international programs. And so we've had high rankings for agricultural sciences, plant and animal sciences, and ag economics and policy research. We've also been ranked very high for our diversity and internationalization, as well as campus sustainability. The campus has grown tremendously over the years, as well as the population of California has grown quite high. And so we're now up to around 32,000 undergraduates and over 7,000 graduate and professional students on campus, with around 1,700 tenured faculty. Next slide. In our college, we have 2,300 acres of land that's dedicated for research, agricultural as well as environmental. It's also for teaching and extension. And this particular slide that you're looking at, the photo, is our indoor grow facility. We're using it primarily for teaching students and getting them prepared for the workforce, but also we're doing some research in there as well as in commercial indoor grow facilities where it's a vertical farm. We have around 166 greenhouses, which sounds great, but it's a lot of work. There are times when I wish we had a few less. Over 2,400 animals. We have 12 animal facilities and lots of museums and collections. Next slide. We have, I think one of the things that's really helped us with our international presence, and especially with international students and scholars and visitors, is we have a central and comprehensive global and international office right in UC Davis. It's run by Vice Chancellor Joanna Ragulsa, and it's really a place for championing the goal of global education for all. And her goal is to make sure that every student has a global learning experience. And that's a tall order, but they're doing a very good job of making that happen. And they're also highly focused on the UN Sustainable Development Goals. And that's one of the things that they really target a lot of their projects and work on. This office will provide service for over 10,000 of our international students, scholars, and their families. And it supports faculty research and engagement through lots of different grants and awards, other resources. And they manage around 140 international partnerships with institutions across 40 different countries. Next slide. In our own college, we have Associate Dean and Professor Ermias Cabrab, and Ermias is in charge of our college's global engagement. And he's been focusing on also the Sustainable Development Goals, but there are a lot of different projects that he has going. And I just listed a couple that I thought would be of interest, where they do have engagement with Chinese scientists on these various different projects. And so these are just a handful of some of the ones that they're heavily involved in. I think that one of the other things that we're looking at, and one of the questions I know has been around, what are some of the areas that we should be focusing on for our collaborations? And when I take a look at what we're doing and what we're focusing on now, I would say that where we could really do well with collaboration with Chinese scientists is looking at climate smart agriculture. How do we produce the food that we're going to need for all of the people on the planet in a way that's sustainable, and in a way that has a very small environmental footprint? So I think the climate smart agriculture is a big area for us, and especially in California, where once again, it looks like we're heading into a drought year, and a lot of conversation about that. So sustainable food production, I think, is another area where we can collaborate. And Ermias himself, the guy pictured in this slide, is working with Chinese collaborators on sustainable production of swine, but he's also looking heavily at greenhouse gas production in livestock and ways to eliminate that. And so Ermias has been in the news a lot because he's working with different collaborators, Wageningen and other universities, on feeding cows seaweed, and as a way to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions. And again, they're trying to do that in a sustainable way as well. And so it's an extra challenge working with a sea vegetable. And I would say, finally, the other area that I think is super important for all of us to be working on is how do we maintain soil health? We can't grow the crops well if our land is poor. And so we absolutely need to be focused heavily on soil health. I think others have already talked about food security, food nutrition, food justice is a big one on our campus. Our students want to know, why are some people hungry in the United States? And they want to understand better all the components that go into poverty. And so I think those three areas around food are also extremely important as well. And with that, I'll stop and turn it back over to Wyndham.
Dean Dillard, thank you very much. I think you touched on some of the concern that people have as well, that one of the pre-submitted questions exactly is thinking about China, as Professor Huang mentioned, that has announced a goal of carbon neutrality by 2060. And the Biden administration also have outlined climate change as one of the key priorities. We'll follow up and ask you for your thoughts on exactly what are some of the initiatives on education and research related to climate smart agriculture. But now I want to turn over to Professor Zhu Jing, who is the Dean of College of Economics and Management, and also Chen Gong, Chair Professor at Nanjing Agricultural University. Dean Zhu.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Zhang. Good morning and good evening, everyone. It is my great pleasure to have the opportunity to share with you my view on the challenges and the opportunities of China-US cooperation in higher education of agriculture. Next, please. Yeah, I come from Nanjing Agricultural University. It is a pioneer of modern agriculture, education, research, and extension in China. In fact, this university has always attached great importance in international cooperation. As early as in the 1920s, the predecessor of this university has long been involved in international cooperation with the US partners. The Plant Improvement Project, launched together with Cornell University, is the first international technical cooperation in agriculture in China. And the impact of this program is even felt today because a large number of Chinese specialists in crop improvement were trained during that period. We believe that the pioneer close cooperation between the two sides also contribute to our university's strong performance today. Next slide, please. Yeah, actually, it ranks very high, especially in the performance table that assess universities against the US Sustainable Development Goals. It assessed the university's research on hunger, teaching on food sustainability, and the commitment to tackle food waste and address hunger among students and the local communities. Next, please. Next, please. Yeah. The college I am in, the college, oh, the previous one, please. The previous one. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, the College Economics of Management is even more closely related with our US partners. John Lossenbach, a Cornell PhD graduate, actually started the discipline of agricultural economics in China in 1921. And he is also the first dean of the department, the predecessor of our college. He has also conducted the first field survey in China, which has profound impact even today. Next, please. Likewise, it also laid a very good foundation for the strong performance of this discipline, agricultural economics, of our college as of today. And we were also proud to have outstanding alumni who were trained in agricultural economics in our college back decades ago. For example, the two panelists today, Professor Huang and Professor Shen Dongfang, are all alumni of our college, and the others like Lin Xiuzhang and Shiton in Yale University and Ren Zhong in Boston University, etc. Next, please. In fact, our university is fostering new international initiatives with a global vision. It has proposed to set up a World Agriculture Prize together with the Chichera Board, aiming at encouraging the global development of the mission of higher education institutions in education, research, and innovation in agriculture and life sciences by recognizing the distinguished contribution of an individual to this mission. Since 2012, the prize has been awarded to 10 scientists for all over the world, and you can see very clear that 4 are from the United States. If I count, 2 are from UC Davis, in fact, and 1 from Cornell, the other from Ohio State University, and another one, the only one from China is from China Agricultural University. Next, please. Yeah. Today, agriculture in China is in the era of transition, and it also poses challenges and opportunities for agriculture education. For example, the GDP percentage of agriculture declined from some 40% to 7% during the past half century. And the focus and attention on agriculture has also extended much more from production to the whole food value chain and to the related environmental issues and well-being of human health and etc. It poses challenges to agriculture education in the traditional form and the mindset. Yet, it also opens door for new area in the very concept of agriculture and offering opportunities for integrating with other sectors, including the cutting-edge areas. Of course, cross-learning and collaboration is needed in that sense, and international cooperation is even more important for agricultural education than back a century ago. The next, please. Yeah, for example, Nanjing Agricultural University has fostered a very strong partnership with the US universities, UC Davis. We have the One Health Center, student programs, and every year we set more than 500 students for short-term exchanges. And with Cornell universities, we have the degree program in agriculture and have strong relationship with the University of Connecticut, just to name a few. Next, please. Yeah, in our college, we have very strong with US partners as well. We recruit every year worldwide outstanding graduates from US universities, and we set periodic summer camp students with, for example, Purdue universities, and international academic activities actually are carried out very, very frequently. And we have just established the Food Research Center in transition and have 10 international teams to work collaboratively with us. Of course, the collaborations of researchers on paper publication and some joint research on frontier issues are very common. Next, please. For international cooperation, we definitely encountered with new challenges in recent years, especially designated by the COVID-19, the shutdown of campuses, and some policy shifts of immigration in some countries, and declining willingness of the students to study abroad. But we cannot deny, and I think it is even more increasing, the demand of higher education opportunities from China and from the people in the US to know the world to a wider perspective. And the thrive of e-learning and digital platform give rise to the opportunities that we should explore. And evolving internationalization of Chinese higher education is also worth noting. So from my point of view, the great opportunities lie ahead. There are always more solutions than difficulties. Next, please. I would like to share a little bit of the example of our university working together with our US partner, Michigan State University. We actually have established jointly the NAU-MSU Joint Institution in Nanjing in 2019. It provides opportunities to create academically rigorous and safe education abroad programs. It also serves as a hub for Chinese students and international students to come together, learn together, and experience the advanced education resource of both universities. Next, please. It also hosts an entire entity called Asian Hub. And to cope with the challenges of COVID-19, like what has been done in China Agricultural University, NAU and the MSU also developed a China-based study program for the MSU students who cannot travel to the US for study. Next, please. This is the beautiful campus of our university. Although we can only meet online today, I really look forward that the cooperation between China and the US agriculture educators and the whole sectors of education will be more and more. And I look forward to future enhanced collaborations between the two sides. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Zhu. I had the pleasure to visit the beautiful campus myself a couple years ago, and I also want to thank you for sharing the long tradition and history that Nanjing Agricultural University in international collaborations. If I remember correctly, that Professor Scott Rizal's first invitation to go to China in the 1980s was actually coming from Nanjing Agricultural University as well. So last but not least, that we have Dr. Cassian Kress, who is the Vice President for Agricultural Administration and Dean of College of Food, Agricultural and Environmental Sciences at The Ohio State University. And Dean Kress previously also served as the Vice President for Extension and Outreach at Iowa State University as well. So Dean Kress.
Thank you. Good morning and good evening. I do represent the faculty, staff, students, alumni, and stakeholders who make up the Cornerstone College at The Ohio State University, the College of Food, Agricultural, and Environmental Sciences. And we are honored to be part of this event. Our college is both literally the cornerstone college of our university, which began as Ohio Agricultural and Mechanical, and continues to be a critical component of a comprehensive research university and the cornerstone of life on Earth because of our disciplines. In our college, we prepare people to sustain life. Next slide, please. Within our college, like many others, we focus this work on 4 grand challenges and see collaboration as essential to all of them. Of course, you've heard several people talk about sustainability, and we think of that as trying to do 3 things all at the same time, and that's what makes it so difficult. We try to ensure viable agricultural production in all of its forms, while at the same time ensuring food security and safety, and environmental and ecosystem sustainability. We also, here at The Ohio State University, with our large medical complex and health sciences that are quite comprehensive, focus a lot on One Health, that intersection and interaction among human, animal, and environmental health. And then, of course, we have several major urban centers as well as a very large rural population in Ohio. And so the rural-urban interface, where we explore the tensions and opportunities in the communities, industries, those policies, the economies, and the communications between our rural and urban residents. And then finally, and one of, we think, the biggest challenges facing agriculture is leadership, preparing and inspiring the next generation of scientists and leaders who will take up this work and continue to advance it. The potential for our work is unlimited. Each of these grand challenges encourages interdisciplinary work and provides compelling problems which must be addressed for our species to survive. Much like Borlaug, Longping, and Washington Carver, we carry on the critical work of the human species that was begun around 12,000 years ago, a simple but essential activity that when you stop to think about it is truly amazing. What we all do is harness the sun, the source of pretty much all energy on planet Earth, and convert it so humans can use it for food, fiber, fuel, and increasingly innovative outputs. As agriculture has converted energy for the world to use, human industry sped up, but it sped up for a very specific reason, not just because we were individually nourished, but because it also makes it possible for us to live together, for towns to form, for our populations to grow, and for us to all learn from each other. I raise this with you because while many of us understand this about our work, we find ourselves in a time when agriculture's impact is not always well understood or valued among some who have been freed by agriculture to pursue other things, such as computer science, business, the arts, or other industries. Our remarkable success at sustaining life in increasingly efficient ways has meant fewer of us are needed to do it. Fewer of us understand what it takes to do it, and fewer of us appreciate what must be done to preserve our ability to continue to do it well. In the United States, we see an increasingly smaller percentage of our population engaged in agriculture. About 1% engaged in agriculture leaves many in our population with little understanding of what it takes to be able to do it and do it well. Consumers often believe modern agriculture has a more negative environmental impact than traditional agricultural practices of the mid-1900s, when in reality, virtually all agricultural practices have decreased their environmental footprint. What compounds this is that shifts in our demographics and in our industry have meant that what's good for production agriculture is not necessarily been good for rural residents. And so we have rural communities struggling to find a foothold in today's economy. These communities have perhaps been most heavily impacted by agricultural's efficiency as the need for work has shifted. In the dozen years prior to the pandemic, 1 of every 3 international students on an American campus was from China. But early indicators suggest that Chinese student interest could be slow to rebound after the huge declines in international enrollments caused by COVID-19, and the reasons could be coming from both sides. At the same time, just in the United States, there are nearly 60,000 high-skilled agriculture job openings expected annually, yet our nation's colleges only produce about 35,000 graduates each year. Simply put, we need leadership. We need people willing to invest themselves and their lives in not only the enterprise of agriculture, but with the recognition that it forms the cornerstone of our societies and our communities. Like our own Dr. Ratan Lal, the World Food Prize laureate last year, with his work in carbon sequestration and soil health. Based on past experience, most of the Chinese undergraduate students who pursue an education at The Ohio State University come here interested in either business or engineering. If they are not able to enter one of those colleges, then they look for alternatives, and we can hope to capture and inspire them. But we need to do more to help more students understand that no matter what they may be interested in, international trade, hunger, health, the environment, business and finance, that they can find a place for themselves in agriculture where there are many opportunities. It could very well be a food scientist who cures cancer. It could be a plant breeder that solves hunger. A soil scientist may create the solution for clean water or for solving the problems of climate change. And we need leaders and partners who understand this and who value the importance of the work we all do. We seek those who will join us in our mission. But will we surmount the problems of inspiring the next generation with the importance of our work, like a Borlaug, a Longping, or a Washington Carver? Or will we allow ourselves to be slowed down by things that are outside the scope of scholarship, which could prove difficult for us to get past? Will we rise to focus? You can advance the slides. I'm sorry, I forgot. And go on to the next too. Or will we rise to focus on the scientific questions that impact the citizenry of this planet Earth as the focus of our collaborations and partnerships? Next slide, please. And inspiration for the next generation of scientists. Dialogues that put the scientific discovery first is what we should all strive for, to address the complex challenges which face all of us on planet Earth and will take all of us to be able to address. We have unprecedented research opportunities. We have a great need to continue to attract and prepare students for the future. We have a compelling mandate to broaden and refine our effective extension and outreach efforts to include more resources, technology transfer, and industry partnerships so that a global audience can benefit and value what all of us do. We believe that we prepare people for the ultimate work. We sustain life. Thank you, and thank you for the invitation to be here.
Thank you very much, Dean Kress. I want to remind everyone that Professor Tan Laud, as Dean Kress mentioned, will actually be one of the panelists next week in the think tank dialogue, and who is also the World Food Prize winner last year. And certainly, Dean Kress, I look forward to the day that I will go back to Columbus for homecoming day, homecoming game, hopefully later this year, maybe next. So I think I will start with some of the questions that we got from the pre-submitted questions. A lot of the panelists have talked about grand challenges that Dean Kress has outlined, as Ambassador Quinn in the opening celebration also laid out 3 joint challenges: producing enough high quality food sustainably, climate change and climate smart agriculture, as well as human and animal disease, as we see both as evidenced by the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic, but also the African swine fever in China as well. And I think President Sun and Professor Huang also talked a lot on China's efforts and also the US attention in rural revitalization and poverty alleviation and rural development. So I will start with Dean Dillard, since you specifically mentioned about the climate smart agriculture. And so I would ask you, for these grand challenges, what do you think are the opportunities for US and China to collaborate on, especially among the educators, and later on at each of the panelists, that you can also chime in if you want to talk about these topics. Thank you. Dean Dillard?
Yes, I guess from where I sit in California, I'm looking at climate change as one of the big impacts on agriculture. And it really has the potential to impact what crops we grow, how we grow them, when we grow them. And it also will impact the pests and the natural disasters that will affect these crops. And so I really look at food security and climate change as intertwined, that one or the other or both can have huge impacts on agriculture and food production. I think working together in collaboration in lots of projects, collaborative projects, we can mitigate the effects of climate change. We can work on how to reduce greenhouse gas emissions in our farming and ranching operations. We can work on developing more resilient crops. And I think that was one of the reasons that Pam Ronald received the Gachera Prize, is because she had looked at resilience development in rice. And these are the kinds of things that I think are really going to help us, but we need to work together collaboratively on those. I also really feel strongly that we need to be incorporating more technologies, such as the CRISPR technology, in our breeding programs and in our production programs, so that we have more resilient crops. Again, being able to withstand anything that comes at them. And then I think it's super important to really be exploring the many components of soil health. That is the key to everything. It grows in the ground. We can't have the animals without feeding them some plants. And so again, it always comes back to that soil health. And I think that's super important for us to be looking at. And so those are really sort of the things that I was thinking about around climate. And we have lots of collaborations in that area, people looking at all sorts of things, soilless plant production, is another one where they feel that the actual impact on the environment is a lot smaller than growing things in the ground. But it also fits very well into big cities where you can produce in a closed environment, controlled atmosphere environment, and controlled environment in a small space with just a little bit of water, and you can have production from those vertical farms. So lots of different things, but I think it all requires collaboration, and that's something that our faculty are eager to do.
Great, thank you, Dean Dillard. So I would like to turn over to President Sun or Professor Huang. Professor Huang has talked about gene editing and biotech, as Dean Dillard has talked about, and in fact, that China has mentioned that seed science and technology last year announced that is one of the key area that China will plan to hugely make major investment and make progress as well. And in fact, China is already one of the world's leader in genome editing for both crops and animals. I know President Sun is also, yourself is also a renowned award-winning scientist in wheat genetics yourself as well. So where do you see the opportunities with between China and the U.S. in seed science and technology agricultural technology collaboration in general? And probably Professor Huang can also chime in as well.
Well, yeah, that's a good question. Actually, China and the US for the last half centuries actually very successfully collaborating in advancing seed technologies and by application of seed technology to increasing agricultural productivity. I myself was in Colorado State University about 30 years ago, and visiting and doing my research there with breeding. So in the new area, new technology, seed technologies are advancing very quickly. And both China and the US are major players in advancing these technologies. So there are very huge opportunities for us to closely collaborate, to work together in technology advancing, in marketing, business model elaborations, to make a further collaboration with the industry to benefit the country. Actually, you know, myself and my university have closely collaborating with US companies actually, like Pioneer, Monsanto, and we already have very happy collaboration in the past. So we strongly believe university, government, and industries triangle innovation, new strategies is the future our choices. So in this terms, US, China have good market. US have a very good experience in seed industry and also technologies. So we strongly believe in the future closer collaboration in this area is the very good mutual beneficial area for these two countries. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Sun. President Sun. So Professor Huang, do you want to also comment on the biotech question and Dean Dillard's comment on building resilient crops, especially in the face of climate change and also maintaining soil health?
Yeah, I fully agree with two speakers earlier saying that, including the Professor Shang just mentioning in cooperation between biotech. I think in this area, we need to cooperation in terms of science, technology. That's very important. But I see more important is cooperate in terms of economics, impact, policies. I think we need a great learner to see how new gene editing technology, how will be regulated in the future. I think the cooperation between China and US and will be important to guide the development of this technology in the future. I think in this need more engagement of social science, economists in this cooperation. And I will end here.
I'm a social scientist, so I share the same bias, Professor Huang, that you have as well. So I'm fully on board. So next, I will turn over to Dean Hill. Dean, you talked about that Tuskegee University is the leader of the 1819 land-grant university, which is really which is great and it's really important. But I think that the Chinese colleagues probably are less familiar with the 1819 land-grant universities. Where do you see the opportunities for the US and China to especially to collaborate with historically Black colleges led by Tuskegee universities, and both in terms of education and maybe extension? I think you make really good points in your remarks that when you are thinking about the production scene in China, that China is full of small farmers that similar in the situation that the 1819 land-grant university is dealing with as well. Dean Hill?
Okay, thank you for the question. Well, it's taken about 30 years. Could not have answered that question until maybe the last 3 or 4 years, but it took us that long to actually get together ourselves, get the political base, and form our centers of excellence and come up with communications amongst ourselves so that we now have 4 centers, 2 more coming, all funded by Congress. And what we had to do was really put university egos aside and decide we were going to be one. So we have a place for you to go now. It's called the 1890 Universities Foundation. We have a CEO. We've been in business about 4 or 5 years, and it's a place where you can get all 19 of us at one time. And we have a research dynamic, a cooperative extension dynamic, and we have great leadership and a rotating board that involves a great leadership from our presidents, deans, extension, et cetera. So we are finding our way, and that's where I'm pointing everyone to strengthen that organization. Now, Tuskegee leads one of the centers, the one dealing with small farmers, ranchers, and landowners. And we're just getting refunded again with this new farm bill. And it's great at having worked at a small university and worked with Ohio State and Davis and Cornell and Illinois and Auburn and Iowa, how that works. But this allows for some real sustainability and to get talent from the different schools. You know, where are our soybean breeders and geneticists? Where are our people working with hogs? Where are our people? So you take all 19 of us and we have good people in different places, and then we can leverage the strengths. And certainly we're taking on climate, the same issues that you're bringing up here. We are taking on collectively and finding where are 4, 5, 6, 10, 12 scientists in climate expertise across maybe 4 or 5 universities. So it's a baby in the making that a smart, top university in the US or China would go to and help build that and get some fabulous students and faculty to work with in a new way. I challenge you.
This is a great insight, I think, Dean Hill. Based on our previous conversation, I think U.S. Heartland and China Association will take on your challenge, and we'll follow up with you on more concrete steps to advance these dialogues and collaborations with the 1819 University Foundation you mentioned. So given the time and constraint, I want to reserve the last 2 questions for Dean Kress and Dean Zhu. So what do you think are what your organization are doing addressing these grand challenges as outlaid by Dean Kress and Ambassador Quinn, and what are some of the promising and new ways are between the U.S.-China agricultural collaboration, as Dean Drew pointed out, that the students who want to go to Michigan State, for example, are now studying temporarily at Nanjing Agricultural University. So I would turn over to Dean Drew first, and maybe and close with Dean Kress.
Yeah, thank you for the question. I really agree with the saying that I think is presented last speaker. We should prepare for our next generation of scientists and leaders. So I do think to training them collaboratively, to give them the broader vision and perspective of the global issues and common challenges is really important. So I think new initiatives like the joint institutions and other collaborated forms to educate them is necessary to enable them to have the ability to meet the future challenges. Nanjing Agricultural University actually is exploring with our US and other countries' partners to make steps toward that end. The joint institution of MSU and NAU is only an example or is experiment. We really look forward to the future opportunities of collaborating more with other universities, including the universities and colleges who have the leaders today in this panel. I will stop here.
Thank you. Dean Kress?
Thank you. And again, such an honor to be here among these colleagues. And Dean Zhu said it so well. The preparation, I think, is so key. And the ways we do that is one, by broadening and thinking in very multidisciplinary ways. It's not going to be in just a single content area, but I would elaborate on what she suggested by also thinking about how we create those opportunities even earlier to inspire more young people. Whether that's through early sort of virtual initiatives that can start to build relationships and help more young people to understand all of the ways that they could be engaged in this work. Whether it's through extension and programs like 4-H or other youth outreach programs, both virtual and face-to-face exchanges and opportunities that begin to make sure that these young people have the opportunities to learn about this, such as the World Food Prizes Youth Institutes, for example. All of those, I think, the earlier we can get to young people who perhaps don't have very much experience with agriculture and help them to understand the high-tech nature of the work that we're doing and the just fascinating work to be done. And then these incredible, inspiring people who are part of agriculture, I think that we will be more successful. But thank you again for involving me, and what an honor to be among these colleagues today.
Thank you very much, Dean Kress, and thanks for to all our wonderful panelists and for taking time out of your busy schedule. I want to end with one of the story I heard from a podcast that one of the principals from a Chinese middle school described that how he learned lessons from going to one of the high schools in the U.S. in North Carolina and served as a shadow principals and learned how principals in U.S. schools make decisions and what sort of the constraints and priorities they are. I wish that that once we see the end of the COVID-19 pandemic, all of us could get together and some of the deans from China could visit the US and trade notes with the deans from the US and understand what are the constraints and opportunities and priorities both leaders from both countries would face. And I think these face-to-face interactions would be wonderful in building bridges and advancing cooperation. So with that, I think we'll close the segment 1. And I think, Min, how about we have a 3-minute break before we start segment 2? Thanks again for all the wonderful speakers from panelists for segment 1 panels, and thank you for your time.
Thank you. Please feel free to stay around. We'll have a little break and people can take those 3-minute break, please.
Welcome back, everyone. So welcome to the U.S.-China Education Dialogue. We're entering the segment 2 with 4 wonderful speakers. So without further ado, we'll start with Professor Fan, who is Chair Professor and Dean of Academy of Global Food and Policy, and he at China Agricultural University. Before joining China Agricultural University, Professor Fan also served as the Director General at IFPRI, International Food Policy Research Institute. Professor Fan?
Thank you, Wendell. So I'm not going to speak about sort of concrete collaborations between US and Chinese universities. So I will focus on one area, that is the food system approach. Now, I'm not going to use PowerPoints. If I remember correctly, when I was in US in the mid-80s, the fashion at that time was to use transparencies. Then we moved to PowerPoint slides and so on. I think the new fashion is you should speak without PowerPoints. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to set up a new trend. So when I started in US, in the mid 80s, our focus in agriculture and food is very much on production side. The farm management. I remember all the farm management, programming, production function I learned at the University of Minnesota. Then we move towards natural resource management, probably sometimes around the 90s, and gradually to other issues, poverty and so on. Now here in China, I think we experienced the same trend. Before the reform in 1978, 79, we were very much focused on production. As a minute, we were hungry, we were struggling with lower productivity, lower production. We needed to produce more to feed increasing, rapidly growing population and urbanization. And then after reform, the production increased, and we began to diversify our production, fruits, vegetables, dairy production, and so on. So, on a global level, I have worked for CGIAR for the same trend. The Green Revolution was very much pioneered by Norman Borlaug. And that time, our objective was mainly to produce more, to feed increasing population. I think without Green Revolution technologies, we would have probably 1 billion more hungry people in the world. And then CGIAR began to move towards natural resource management, water, land, soil production, and so on. And then gradually shifted to hunger, malnutrition, and so on. So today, I must argue that we needed to bring all this together to use a food system approach. The reason is today we are facing many, many challenges. On the one hand, natural resources degradation, climate change. On the other hand, malnutrition, not only undernutrition, but also overnutrition. Even here in China, in 2020, the percentage of overweight and obese population is more than 50%. So we are facing all the challenges. And here, I wanted to argue that we use a food system approach to increase collaboration between US and the Chinese universities. So what this ideal food system would look like? I think that should have several elements. One is obviously nutrition and health. So our food system must produce healthy, nutritious foods. That's number one. Number two, obviously sustainable, climate resilient. So you use less water, less land, and adapt to climate change, and maybe even help to mitigate the climate change. So I would call it climate resilient food system and sustainable. The third dimension is inclusion. I heard from in Waterhill that food justice is so critical. We wanted to make sure that everybody in the world could benefit from our food system, not just big guys. Smallholders, hungry people, disadvantaged group must benefit from that. And the last one, I also wanted to emphasize the resilience part. The COVID-19 is really a wake-up call that our food systems are very vulnerable to shocks, climate shocks, and now the health shocks like COVID-19. So if we don't do it carefully, we might experience another perfect storm sooner than later. Perfect storm means several incidences come together to hit our food system. So policy, economics can make unique contribution to the food system transformation, from all these challenges we face to a system we wanted to have in the future by 2030 or even by 2050. So economics, I think many of us here are focused on social science, economics, and so on. So I think economics can make, and it's a three unique contribution. One is cost benefit analysis. The food system have huge benefits. It also have huge costs. How can we take into consideration of all the externalities from the food system, environment, health, and so on? And any policy, any instruments also involves cost side and the benefit side. Economics can contribute. Second is a trade-off. We know that sometimes certain technologies, certain practices have trade-off. Trade-off between efficiency and resilience, trade-off between nutrition and environment, trade-off between, let's say, the rich group and the poor people. So how can we really analyze this trade-off to present all these different scenarios to policymakers? The third is the political economy. We know that there are so many stakeholders in our food system: farmers, smallholder farmers, the informal workers, the processors, even final consumers, policymakers, and so on. They all have different interests, different incentives. How can we use a political economy lens to analyze the different options to make sure that we can move forward the food system transformation and ensure that everybody will benefit from the food system transformation? So I have been working with some of the US universities already, like Chris Perry, in pushing for this food system concept and food system approach to really bring all our past work into a consistent framework. Now, also begin to have dialogue with some of the professors from UC Davis, Iowa State, and the University of Minnesota, of course, International Food Policy Research Institute. Can we really have a really game change starting from now by working together? So I also have to mention that not just economists can make a great contribution, but non-economists, particularly let's say soil scientists, the plant breeders, everybody can work together. Interdisciplinary approach is a must. Finally, the global collaboration. The problem that we are facing today on food systems are global in nature. We have one planet, we have climate change affects everybody. Hunger, malnutrition, to me, is a public bad. So the global collaboration is a must. Global collaboration is a solution. So I wanted to end here. I really enjoyed this panel. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Fan. I think you made a really good suggestion, and think we need to think about more holistically in terms of food systems approach. And there are trade-offs and we're facing these challenges as you described, not individually but all together. So we're not only thinking about the trade-off between different groups, but also the trade-off between agricultural production and the environment as well. I also noticed that you also talked about that if we think about historically, the more of the focus more probably will be on higher yields and more production levels. But now I think we need more from the food systems, both in terms of nutrition and also sustainability resilience as well. So I think that's really great. So I would like to turn over to our second panelist, Dr. Damona Doyle, who is Associate Vice President at Oklahoma Cooperative Extension Service and also Regents Professor at Oklahoma State University. She is currently also serving on the E-Extension Board of Directors and also the U.S. Vice President of the International Farm Management Association. To me personally, he is a great alumni from Iowa State University and a mentor. So Damona, you have the floor.
Thanks, Wendong, and good evening and good morning to others. Thank you very much for the invitation to be part of this panel. I'm going to focus my comments tonight on the impacts of changes in technology on agricultural education and outreach in the U.S. from the perspective of the Cooperative Extension Service. The Extension Service connects land-grant universities throughout the United States to provide agriculture and other programming. I want to acknowledge that education occurs in many high schools throughout the country as well as technical schools. So next slide, please. Traditional extension has relied heavily on a physical presence of people working and living in communities throughout the states. Community relationships have been important in identifying local problems and issues to be addressed, which informs educators in their work plans and marketing programs and developing funding support and forming partnerships for projects. Extension employees are university employees, so there are direct links to the university for training and for research-based information. University faculty respond to concerns that are identified within the state by conducting research at experiment stations, in their labs, in their offices, and in on-farm demonstrations and trials. University specialists also provide regular training for our local extension educators. They provide them newsletters, articles, and PowerPoint slides for educators to use locally. Some of the delivery mechanisms historically have included publications ranging from short fact sheets to longer bulletins, and a variety of in-person events, both workshops and conferences and field days. Traditional media has played a role. But in Oklahoma, about 40% of our ag contacts are through consultations. This is less efficient, but certainly highly valued by the clients. In addition, we have roles in providing services, and that's diagnostics for plant disease, for insects, for weed identification, soil, water, and forage testing. And the results of those labs, from the labs, are interpreted then, and educators share their findings and recommendations, for instance, on fertilizer rates for crops. Next slide, please. All the extension services were migrating towards greater use of technology and outreach the past couple of years, but the pandemic ramped up the speed of implementation because of the need to work remotely and avoid or limit gatherings. Some of our employees who've been slow to adopt technology were forced to do a lot of things differently in very short order. The paths that we've been on to greater use of platforms certainly started with websites, which grew in importance over time. And now we focus on digital platforms that host and link lots of different kinds of educational assets, from the publications to videos to online courses. We're starting to experiment with things like artificial intelligence to see if we can answer frequently asked questions in areas such as integrated pest management. We did webinars and web meetings. Initially, they were focused on internal training for our employees, but they've shifted, certainly in the past year, to much more outwardly focusing with a public audience in mind. The challenge has been to figure out how to make those more interactive. So we're learning to use breakout rooms and other add-ons such as flip charts and meeting hangouts that would simulate the hallway conversations that we had when meetings were in public. We had to transition our publications and software tools, spreadsheets, and so on to become mobile friendly, because everybody looks for information first on their phone. We've done a bit of app development. We've learned to use social media not only for marketing, but also for events, either live or pre-recorded. We've added online courses to the mix, not just narrated PowerPoints, but interactive exercises with quizzes and links to publications and videos embedded. And the subjects are wide-ranging, from things that help city dwellers in U.S. cities to grow poultry in their backyards legally, to official training for local government officials and others that may need continuing education credits. Customer relationship management is a work in progress here at OSU, but there are other institutions have built out platforms that make it easy for the public to find materials that are either basic in nature or more advanced, and allow people to subscribe to content that's based on their personal interests. This past year, we've learned to work remotely, with employees learning new skills from forwarding their office phones to home to actually hosting events from home. We're doing an increasing number of hybrid meetings, allowing for both in-person and virtual attendees. Means new equipment to facilitate them and requires some additional support. Plus, educators have to learn how to engage two types of audiences simultaneously. And virtual teams have become absolutely essential. At OSU, we're learning to use Microsoft Teams, but we have to be nimble and learn other platforms as well, because our partners in other states may be using Google or other things. Next slide, please. So I think there are a variety of ways that we can collaborate, not only within different states in the United States, but also with other countries like China. And one is just sharing our ideas for how to overcome the challenges associated with technology adoption. Certainly in Oklahoma and many rural areas in the United States, internet access is a challenge. We have a specialist that's working with a legislative task force on policies to help encourage private and public investment. He's working with libraries on hotspot lending, and also working with tech companies to install community wireless networks on the outsides of buildings. We need skill development, both of our audience and our personnel, with respect to technology. So it's helping them overcome fears, address security concerns, learn how to avoid Zoom bombing, and just learn basics of using the internet in their business. We've had to train personnel to help others learn how to access via Zoom, to host virtual sessions, teach in hybrid meetings, and make virtual learning fun and engaging. There's some cultural change needed as well for both our educators and our audience. Lots of educators tell me they much prefer to work with people one-on-one. They get job satisfaction through those personal connections and personal interactions. And so using technology is not natural to them. Our audiences too, in many cases in rural areas, have less exposure to technology because they haven't been as engaged in office workplaces that are heavily dependent on computers. But certainly everybody prefers to learn by doing as well. And so seeing, feeling, touching, doing is not the same when you're trying to learn virtually. We're learning how to market and promote things differently. So the logistics associated with that. It's also a challenge measuring, I think, our impact and effectiveness in virtual platforms. Lots of times our funding is dependent on whether we're making a difference in people's lives. So it can be hard to collect data on our impact through digital outreach. Support and financing is different as well. You need different things. So it's equipment, it's software licenses, computers, support personnel. So new kinds of people with new skills in video production, instructional design, app developers, digital support to make sure your content and your virtual platforms is found. So local governments may be willing to support people that they can see locally and know what they're doing in the community, perhaps be less interested in technology and indirect support to them through IT and others. Next slide, please. So another area that I think we can collaborate on is sharing lessons learned and best practices in using this new technology. So once we've solved the how to do it issues, there's still the questions of how to do it well. So we've got to identify what works best in different situations and for different subjects. And so it's tool selection, matching them to the needs, developing things to fill gaps. And they're different in different subject matters areas. So you do different things in farm management than you would in livestock health and in crop production. We've got to figure out how to do a better job of developing our audience, but also targeting them and deciding when and where to advertise. Is it Facebook? Is it Google Ads? In our case, Women in Agriculture found out, for instance, about our statewide conference from Facebook ads more than any other venue that we attempted. In virtual teams, we've got to figure out what functions can be done efficiently online and what things really need to be done in person. And certainly we've got to learn more about ways to engage our stakeholders through virtual formats. Another way that I think we can share ideas is developing new funding models. So traditionally in the US, we've relied on government support for extension to fund our outreach, but those dollars have been shrinking over time, not only from federal sources, but also generally from state and local sources as well. And finally, I think connecting people with similar roles is something that we can certainly do. Most of the valuable professional development opportunities I've had have been exchanges with colleagues with similar job responsibilities and interests. And I think Wendong hit on that in the last session. I always learn something that's really important. And that's certainly something that we can do together. That global perspective is really invaluable. So thank you. And I look forward to discussion.
Thank you very much, Damona. I think, as you correctly pointed out, that typically during the winter months, you and I probably will be driving a lot in the cars, but now thanks to the pandemic, many of our clients are forced to learn Zoom and other virtual platforms, and I was actually able to make presentations to Ohio stakeholders and Michigan and not Oklahoma yet, but I think that there are some plus and minus. We'll touch on this in a Q&A. But I want to thank you for your remark. I want to now turn over to our third panelist, Professor Kevin Chen, who is Qiushi Chair, Professor and International Dean of China Academy of Rural Development, or CARD, at Zhejiang University. He is also the China Program Leader and Senior Research Fellow at the IFPRI International Food Policy Research Institute. Professor Chen?
Well, Wendong, thank you very much for your kind introduction, and it's great to be here. I'm going to focus my comments on agriculture extension and the information communication technology application in the agriculture extension areas. And it was in 2005 when I first come back from Canada to Beijing and to lead China-Canada Agriculture Development Program. And the focus of that program is really on agriculture extension, how to do a better job on agriculture extension. Essential idea is to bring smallholder farmers along during the transforming agri-food system, as Schengen mentioned. And so that's why I like to take this opportunity to talk a little bit about the agriculture extension system in China, which is very much different if we look at US and look at Canada. Next slide, please. And the Chinese agriculture extension system used to be largely dominated as a government-led system with a very concrete different level of agriculture extension agencies at central level, provincial level, city level, county level, township level, even goes to the village levels. And the Chinese system probably has the largest system in the world. They roughly have about 1 million agriculture extension workers in the system. However, in the recent year, there has been changed quite a bit. So there are a number of the reforms and the commercialization of grassroots level agriculture extension system has been going on. So that means different form of delivering agriculture extension system has been coming up and arise and to address the different challenge, largely in response to the transformed agri-food system, the new needs. For example, the extension no longer focuses on the agriculture technology at the farm level alone. It's moved from farm gate, certainly to the dinner tables even, right? How to work with that become a very important issue. Next slide, please. So if we do look at some of the challenge, as I mentioned, one biggest difference in China or US compared to China, US, and Canada, certainly China has many smallholder farmers. And in the earlier session, the Dean here talk about US has about 3 million farmers. China, we have over 200 million. So you look at the difference, and those farmers are very small with a very small land, and also they are quite old, the aging small farmers. So this is definitely the challenge for how you extend the technology to the small farmers. It's become a huge challenge. And again, as Schengen has mentioned earlier, there's increasing demand for the development of sustainable and healthy agri-food value chain. Those become very important. Then we suddenly would find in the traditional system, there's a lack of incentive mechanism for efficient administration of agriculture extension in China. So reform needed to be done, different form needed to be looked at to deliver the agriculture technology and marketing service in China, not only from government-led organization, but also from private sector, from NGO, and particularly from university, even though in those two in US or China or Canada, it's very different models. And as mentioned by the Dean Doyle, that this disruption caused by COVID-19 and digital technology has become playing a larger and larger role, even in the agriculture extension sectors. So that's why the ICT certainly become very important for delivering the agriculture extension. One is due to the transforming agri-food system, there's new demand, and the second is certainly the disruption of pandemics certainly also push forward some new demand. Next slide, please. So the ICT certainly going to be very important to changing the agriculture extension system. And Dean already outlined a number of new applications new technology, ICT technology has been used. So I'm not going to repeat those points one by one, but the central idea is if we look at China, the penetration of the internet is still not that high. Particularly in rural area, it's about 40%. So there's still large room for improvement. If we want ICT technology to play the increasing role, certainly some infrastructure on the internet side, ICT side, needed to be improved. In addition to the different mode of using the ICT technology in delivering the agricultural extension, as mentioned by my previous speakers, Dean Doyer. So I'm not going to repeat those for the sake of time. So let me move to my last slide. Just a quick example, which happened in China. There are many different type of platform for delivering the agriculture extension service through the internet, through the ICT technology platform and so on. But one platform in particular, which I want to mention, which we actually work with the AGRA in Africa, we work with the IFAD and try to extend this particular model to the Africa. So it's called the National Cloud Platform for Grassroots Agricultural Technology Extension in China, which is really cloud-based agriculture extension service developed by Agriculture Information Institute of Chinese Academy of Agricultural Science. The program is largely targeted for the grassroots level agriculture extension worker. As I mentioned, China has almost 1 million agriculture extension workers, which scatter around small towns in China. They need a better technology, need better tools to deliver the service for the small farmer, particularly during those transformation during the pandemics. So the system has the PC and a mobile version. And so they allowed the technician to enable the farmer or agriculture technician to ask a question and consult with experts remotely. This is very important because China is such a large country and the experts are rather limited. So through the internet, you can pool the talents and experts together, and which provide a great service for the farmer and agricultural technician. And also you allowed the monitoring system to set up. As I mentioned earlier, one of the challenges for Chinese system certainly is how can you come up with a better incentive mechanism to make sure the performance of agriculture extension work are there. And ICT-based platform certainly can facilitate the monitoring and evaluate the performance and to promote or facilitate the better performance from the agriculture extension workers. And in particular, also this kind of platform allow the real-time agriculture information collection and sharing and look at, for example, you can look at the crop coverage, look at the situation of crop pest and animal disease, and so sharing the marketing information, pricing information instantly. And all those features and service certainly is very critical to help the small holders to bring them along the transformed agri-food system. Because one challenge, as I mentioned earlier, is food system is transforming. The challenge is how you bring those millions of smallholders along with those transformed agri-food system, benefit them, increase their income is going to be very important. For that particular point, I think the US, Canada, and China has great potential to collaborate together. Let me stop right here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Chen, especially thank you for sharing the specific examples that I think many of our U.S. audience may not be aware of those developments in the Chinese extension system. That I also learned, for example, that even the county leader of my home county the government official also went on Bilibili, the popular website, to promote our vegetables produced in my home county. And so I think there are a variety of new ways that is enabled by the development of ICT, and also that I think at least 500 million Chinese people have mobile phones. So in thinking about the platform people are receiving information is very important as well. So thank you for your insights. And lastly, I want to turn over to Professor Nick Pawson, who is an associate professor and director of graduate programs in the Department of Ag and Consumer Economics at University of Illinois and at Urbana-Champaign. He's a critical member of the award-winning FarmDoc team. And in 2019, Dr. Pawson also served as a senior economist at the White House Council of Economic Advisors, working on trade and agriculture. And also, Nick is also a proud alumni of ISU Econ Department as well. So Nick, I will turn over to you.
Thanks very much for that introduction, Wendong, and the invitation to join the group. And thank you all for being here tonight. So I'm going to go through the slides that I prepared are just a little bit of background information on the extension effort or project that I am involved with at the University of Illinois, and that is the FarmDoc project. So FarmDoc is the agricultural economics extension project here at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. And FarmDoc is kind of a hard thing to define or describe, but ultimately it consists of a team of faculty members in the Agricultural and Consumer Economics Department here on campus, who all contribute applied research-based extension and outreach content and materials that are then distributed in a very web-first format across what is now 3 website platforms. So Professor Doi, talked about kind of what the traditional extension system is like in the U.S., where it consists of people like Wendong would typically be out doing some traveling, talking to groups throughout the state or the region that his extension audience consists of. And the FarmDoc project is a little bit unique in terms of extension projects in the US, in that for over 20 years now, we have really kind of pivoted to and transitioned to more of a web-first delivery. We still do a lot of traditional extension type of work, in-person meetings, but we really do that. We really do most of our work through our family of websites. And so the project started about, like I said, about 20 years ago with the original FarmDoc website. And that website was really a way to just post and promote traditional extension materials in what was then a very new way. So the website included links to, again, very traditional written extension reports on topics like market outlook, farm management topics, provided information about crop and livestock budgets for various regions of Illinois. And the other thing that FarmDoc has been very focused on from the start is providing decision tools to our stakeholders. And that originally and still primarily is done a lot through Excel-based tools that our audience can download from our websites and then help to use to make some of their agronomic or financial decisions for their farm operations. Early on, the site gained traffic and users through about 2007, when for some reason visitors did start to decline for a few years. That also happens to coincide with the start of my career at Illinois. So hopefully it wasn't my effect that caused usage to go down there from 2007 to 2010. But in 2011, we launched our second website, which at the time was a very ambitious and some would call crazy effort through our FarmDoc Daily website to offer a short blog style, research-based extension article every single business day. And so the team committed to this. We didn't know for how long it would work, but we're now just over 10 years into that phase of the FarmDoc project with that FarmDoc Daily website. And we're still, I think we're still going strong. And so I think we've even surprised ourselves with how long we've been able to keep that up. But that has been highly popular. It really contributed to and fueled a lot of the growth that we saw in usage and visits to our website from that 2011 through 2017 time period, which is when we launched our what is now our most recent and our third component of the project, which is the Farm Policy News website. So we've gone from a traditional extension website that maybe had content added to it on a monthly basis to the FarmDoc Daily website, which provides content on a daily basis, to Farm Policy News, which is pushing updates on all sorts of relevant topics to our extension audience, sometimes on a multi-time per day basis through our social media channels. So over time, we've really adapted to changes in the demand for how our stakeholders, for how our extension audience consumes content, particularly on the web. In the last 2 years, we have exceeded 3.5 million unique visits to the full family of our websites. Our audience is primarily Midwest US based, but our reach is also global, with about 20% of our visits to our sites coming from outside the US. I think the important message here is that we have continued to expand and evolve the formats in which we provide content. And in the last 5 or 6 years, we've started experimenting with the use of webinars. We've started putting out video content more recently, and communicating a lot of our information, just announcing that our information is available through various social media websites. And so, while none of us were prepared for what the COVID-19 pandemic would bring to our lives, from an outreach standpoint, here in the FarmDoc team at the University of Illinois, we felt like we were at least pretty well positioned to respond to things. So if we can go to the next slide, show you just a little bit of our experience with offering webinars. So like I said, we've been doing this for a few years. We weren't new to the webinar format when COVID hit last year. We have dabbled in it since about 2014. But obviously our use of the webinar format to provide information to our stakeholders increased significantly in 2020 due to the pandemic and the inability for us to go out and offer more traditional in-person extension meetings. So in 2020, we offered 45 webinar events, and we attracted over 14,500 live attendees to those webinars. I'll talk a little bit more about the webinars that we offered in 2020 coming up here, but it did include a multiple series of events that were focused on COVID-19 and how COVID-19 was impacting agriculture. And then we also were forced to shift what was kind of our highlighted in-person series of meetings that we usually hold at the end of each year. At the end of 2020, we did have to shift those last year to a webinar format. So we had experience kind of offering new events that were very much responses to COVID-19. And we also had some experience last year in taking what was traditional in-person, very large extension meetings and moving those to a webinar format. So in the next slide, I've got some information here on some of the video content that we've made available too. So, I talked about the very large audience we were able to reach last year in terms of live attendees to our webinars. We also get a significant number of views to the archived versions of those webinar events. So one of the nice things about webinars, obviously you can track people from a much larger area because travel is not a restriction. You can also attract a bigger audience over a longer time frame because it's not restricted to the live offering. So on the FarmDoc YouTube channel, we get a significant amount of after the fact views of our webinar events. And then some of the other video content that we've been experimenting with has just exploded in use in 2020 since that's really the only format that people have access to some of this to some of these pieces of information and content through. So one thing that's been wildly popular in 2020 is our 5-minute FarmDoc series. Again, a response to how demand for content like this is changing and how people watch things on the internet. We've created a lot of summary videos of the articles that we write, or summary short videos of the longer webinars that we put out. And that allows users to kind of, take 5 minutes and see if it's something that they might be interested in, and determine if they want to invest the extra time to read the entire article, or to go back and review the entire webinar session if they want to. If the 5 minutes gets them interested, then they can go back and invest the full hour to watch the entire webinar. So that's been very popular. We got a lot of positive feedback and a lot of use in 2020 on those short FarmDoc videos. And then finally, the last slide gives a summary of, like I said, the different types of webinars and the different series that we offered through 2020. So, we would have offered webinars regardless of whether COVID had hit us last year, but there definitely were some events that were added because of it. So the one I would highlight here, that we held a series of 20 webinars from mid-March through late May. And we called that our FarmDoc Daily Live series. I think that was a really popular and kind of a unique webinar series. What we did was as everything was shutting down here in the US because of the pandemic, a lot of university campuses, students and staff were sent home, and it just happened to be right around the spring break period in mid-March. And so the FarmDoc team kind of got together on Zoom, and we decided to put out this series to try to provide some very quick information, get information out to our extension stakeholders about what this coronavirus pandemic meant, what we knew about it at the time, and how we thought it was going to be impacting the agriculture industry in the short to medium term. So in that series, we brought in a series of experts to talk about everything from impacts in the livestock industry to the crop sector to trade. Wendong was one of the experts we brought in to talk about the pandemic and U.S.-China trade relationships and the phase 1 trade deal, and that was a very popular event within that series. So it was providing very timely information. We were able to respond very quickly. We brought in outside experts and just had a lot of success in getting information out in a very uncertain time to our stakeholders. And then the other series I'll highlight here is the one at the end of the year, our Illinois Farm Economics series. Typically what we do in December is we go out on the road. The entire team goes out on the road. We do a series of in-person meetings across the state. We do a meeting every day in a different part of the state of Illinois. So it's kind of our road show every year where the entire team gets together and does some traditional in-person extension meetings. This year, we were forced to move that to a webinar format. We did 5 webinars instead of 5 in-person meetings. And we got close to 3,000 people to attend those 5 webinars. In the last few years at the in-person version of those meetings, I think the max attendance we had was around 850 in total. And so we got 2,000 more people to attend by being able to do it through a webinar format. So, I think to sum up, my message would be that, I think all of us are looking forward to getting back to something close to normal. I know I want to get back in a classroom. I want to see students on campus. I want to get back out and do in-person extension meetings. But I think our experience with the pandemic in the last year has really forced us to utilize the technology that's available to us, and has really kind of forced us to do that more quickly than we might have otherwise. and really shown us some of the benefits and some of the opportunities that we have to use some of this technology to reach people that we weren't reaching, or just to reach a larger audience using this technology. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Wendong, and we can move on to questions.
Thank you very much, Nick. And definitely it was my pleasure to join you last year as part of the webinar. And for the interest of time, I will move to questions. So I will start with the question for Dr. Fan. So you mentioned that we need to develop the food systems approach. So we got a question from the audience that what obstacles must be overcome first in China to adopt a food systems approach, and what's the obstacles would be if we want to adopt this food systems approach in the US?
Yeah, I think, well, firstly, I really enjoyed listening to other panelists. I remember 3 years ago, actually, I worked for the University of Arkansas 3 years. I remember I brought desktop and a slide projector to tell farmers how the U.S. Farm Bill will affect American rice producers' income and so on. It was fascinating. But today, I really.
Professor Fan, we lost connection. I think
there are several probably obstacles. And one obviously is our, sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, because it seems to me there were some interruptions from my side. Anyway, so I think one is our mind. We need to change our mind. We cannot just work in silos, whether you're researchers, whether you're government officials, whether you're private sectors, because today the challenges we face is global, affect everybody. So I think one is changing our mind. Second is government ministries, whether in US, in Europe, or other countries. You know, our ministries are organized based on disciplines, not really based on the challenges or solutions. For example, nutrition and health, the big externality problem from our food system that belong to several ministries, agriculture, health, and probably even beyond. And then the environment is the same thing, agriculture and environment. So we need to bring all these ministries together to tackle the same challenges we're all facing. So the government needs to work together. Now, lastly, the researchers here from our side, I think our research is still very much organized by soil science or plant breeding or economics or whatever. I think at the university, we could use some of the loosely defined think tanks or research institute that can bring different subjects together. You know, I'm an advisor of the Oxfam School of Environment, so they were able to bring different subjects together to tackle environmental issues. CARD from Iowa State and Missouri, I thought that was also a good example. Here in China, we are beginning to think the same, to bring different subjects together to tackle some of the challenges. Obviously, you know, everybody in the world, our consumers, when we, for example, when we eat our next meal, let's not only think about the impact on nutrition and health, but also our environment, but also and social justice, where the smallholders benefit from the next meal, or even next cup of coffee. You know, Starbucks, farmers only get a small share of the Starbucks coffee. So I think that from China, from US side, it's getting better. I think some of the university-based think tanks need to bring this together. Like UC Davis has a sustainable research center. Was a very good example. There are more. Obviously, International Food Policy Research Institute is another great example. It's an international organization based in US. So it has probably 20 nutritionists, maybe still 200 economists, but also lots of social scientists, political scientists, sociologists, and women specialists, and so on. So we need to hire, let's say, the people from different backgrounds to tackle some of the same challenges we all face. Going back to Weidong, might be
Great, thank you for your comments. I think these are great insights. I will turn over to Mona, and we have heard, especially from Professor Chen, that the extension system in China are quite different from the extension system in the public land grant university, and especially now you probably have seen how the Canadian, Australian, and other countries' model look like, given your involvement in the International Farm Management Association as well. So my question is, how relevant do you think that the public university extension system in the US for China, and what are some of the opportunities for us to think about the ways to work together in the area of extension outreach?
Yeah, I think I did a little math, and per capita, you have more extension workers in China per farmer than perhaps we do in the United States, and so I enjoyed those insights. I think there's always opportunities to learn from each other, and so organizations like the International Farm Management Association, where we get to meet with our counterparts and share ideas, question each other's policies, question why things are done the way they are, learn how farmers operate in different environments is really valuable. And through relationships built at conferences like that, there are sabbatics that emerge, there's informal visits, there's farmer to farmer exchanges. And so one of the things that we've really valued in our congresses that we host biennially is the opportunity to have in the audience farmers, farm managers, consultants, educators, so that we can learn from each other. And there are pre and post Congress tours where you visit agribusinesses and have conversations that provide global perspectives on things that you're seeing there. In the technology dimension, we've also started to try to engage young farmers in the International Farm Management Association. So we were providing scholarships to participants to come to our congresses, but we've also recently added an opportunity for virtual exchanges of information. And so we're trying to foster connections between young producers in different countries so that they have an opportunity to talk not only about the production practices that they're using, but to talk about management and trade concerns and all sorts of things. And so I think through our institutions, despite the differences in types and sizes of farmers and those sorts of things, they have a lot of things in common, just as we as educators have in common and can learn from each other.
Great, thank you. I do want to mention that Lou Swanson from Colorado State University and John Lawrence from ISU and Jason Henderson from Purdue also already are starting collaboration with Chinese University of thinking about building an extension system within the Chinese university as well. So I want to ask the next question to Professor Chen. So we have a question from the audience. Is China on a path to more industrial large farms like the US has? If so, what is the implication for the adoption of technology and extension in your mind?
This is a very good question. And China certainly has at the moment a very binomial structure of the farmer side, and largely still dominated by smallholders, but they are emerging larger scale farmers up as well. So in the future, certainly the role played by those larger farmers are going to be more and more important, and for the national food supply and so on. But it definitely going to have very significant implications for agricultural extensions. And so that means in the delivering the service, you have two very different kinds of clients. And one is towards more, larger farmer, a larger farming entity. Another is the smallholders. And given the fact that smallholders are very important still in the supplying food to the nation, to the city, so you really can not ignore either side of those two segments. So that means we need a diversified organizational structure in the agriculture extension system to meet different demand. And increasingly, I think university can play a larger role in that. Private sector also can play a larger role in delivering those services. As I mentioned earlier, certainly ICT technologies and different modern mode of delivering the agriculture extension service going to become very critical. That's where I also think the China and US can come together. In particularly, if we think about on the international stage, right? Global food security is a continuous concern, and university in United States, when I first went there for almost 35 years ago, plus years ago, US university very internationalized, right? So now China in the stage are also very much worried about the global good, public goods, and do good things on to ensure the global food security and so on. So we see agriculture extension in the global stage become very important in that. So I can see the two countries going to have a lot of opportunity if the willing are there to work together to address the global issues like food security. Just last week, the Zhejiang University, for example, they bring the 30 plus university president together, including US. The president of Yale University is there as well to talk about the role of university in addressing the 2030 development goal agenda. Certainly food, the goal number 2 is right there. So I'm very much look forward to more opportunity for the US and Chinese university to work together to address the common global challenge. Back to you, Wen-Tong.
Great, thank you very much, Professor Chen. I think that sustainability, as you mentioned, is definitely one of the shared challenges, and both countries are placing on great values. And as a lot of our speakers talked about, rural revitalization, poverty alleviation, rural development, and Demona talked about rural infrastructure, not only in terms of roads and bridges, but also internet are really important. So for the interest of time, I will ask the last question, and Nick will answer for the US side, but I will also need either Professor Fan or Professor Chen to chime in on the China side, because this is asking situation in both US and China. So the question is that we heard about precision agriculture using big data, machine learning, agriculture, maybe sensors and other technologies. What are the extent of adoption in the field in the US and in China? So Nick, I will turn over to you to comment on the adoption of precision agriculture and some of the newer technologies in the US.
Sure. You know, so I would think, I think we're about trying to remember the first time I had an uncle who farms show me the soil maps that he was creating based on some of the early precision technology he was implementing. And I think that was probably over 10 years ago now. And I think what has happened in the last 10 years for precision ag in the US is we've kind of finally started to identify the value proposition for farmers to adopt that. I think early on, a lot of it was you know, some fancy tools, some expensive tools that didn't have a clear value that they could bring to the farmer. But I think we've clarified that in the last few years, and you know, adoption has increased considerably. And there's a lot of opportunities in that space, especially with the intersection with conservation efforts that are going to be a major push in this current administration and in this next farm bill cycle, in terms of reducing nutrient loss and some of the precision technologies associated with that. And so, you know, I think we're on definitely the rising part of the curve instead of, in terms of adoption and value gained by some of those precision technologies.
Thank you, Nick. So Professor Fan or Professor Chen, do you want to comment on the adoption of the precision agriculture in China? I think Go ahead.
Yep. Yeah, promote, let's say, institutional and technological innovations to really tackle that challenge. The one is from the institutional side, you don't need to have your land connected to each other. You could have several pieces in different places, right? That's institutional innovation to encourage that. Second, in terms of technological innovations, we could use this AI or drones to help to mechanize, to modernize even small park production. So we can send a drone, to several parts of my land, to, let's say, to spread fertilizers or maybe pesticides, or maybe even harvest to bring them down from the mountain, from the hills. I think we needed to really think some sort of out-of-box technologies, institutional innovations to tackle some of the traditional challenges we have, such as large number of smallholders. Going back to you, Andong.
Okay, great. So anything to add, Professor Chen? You have the last word.
Just quick comment, just echo to Professor Shengen Fan's comments. And in particular, China now drive towards the carbon neutrality and to try to control the pollution from agriculture, the non-point pollution issue, which are quite significant challenge we are facing. The precision agriculture technology certainly has the greater potential, but the challenge there, both institutional and funding issues, is how you get a smallholder farmer to on board to adopt those type of potential offered by precision farming practice and the technologies. I think those are going to remain a key to the success of precision farmers in China. Back to you, Wendell.
Great, thank you, great points. And for those of you, I also have watched YouTube videos that the custom services that the Chinese farmer bought, that where the agricultural drones are applying pesticide and spraying for thousands of farmers, that coordinated with extension professionals and the governmental officials as well. So as Nick has showed in this slide, there's a great demand for 5-minute videos rather than 3-hour-long dialogues. I really appreciate you taking the time to join us today, and I really appreciate especially our wonderful speakers for taking the time to give us these insights. And Min will follow up with more information. Next week we'll have the third tranche of the dialogue roundtable, and it's a dialogue on think tank. So I would wish a good day for the Chinese colleagues and good evening for US friends, and I will turn over to Min.
Thank you. I see our speakers are coming in back on the camera. On behalf of US Heartland China Association, and Ambassador Quinn and our chairman, Governor Holden, we want to thank you all for your time. This has been a wonderful dialogue, and we hope to carry on this dialogue and look for more collaboration. And I do want to ask our audience to take a quick survey when you leave. But everyone, thank you so much, and good night and good day and goodbye. I'm sure you want to wave goodbye to your friends here. A lot of you guys know each other very well. Thank you so much.